Welcome to the Holy Smokes Podcast, a show about faith, friendship, fine tobacco, and drink. I'm Steve Ryder in Franklin, Tennessee, and I am at Crown Cigars and Ales here in the Franklin area, and I'm sitting with David. I'm not quite sure where we met. Was it on one of the virtual herfs right at the beginning of COVID? Is that?
It was, yeah.
I'm with David Osk, who lives up in, you said Hendersonville, which is northeast?
Hendersonville is kind of known for being the hometown of Johnny Cash. So there's Johnny Cash Parkway that goes through Hendersonville, and he had a home on the lake up there. Actually, it burned down several years back, but yeah, it's a small community on the north side. I love it.
So where'd you grow up?
I grew up in a little town in Minnesota called Glenwood, and it's about 100 miles northwest of Minneapolis. Has one stoplight and
how big?
A lot of cows. About 2,500.
Okay.
So yeah.
About twice the size of my hometown.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, you get it. Yeah, it's a very different existence. I often talk about comparing my kids' upbringing, being next to a pretty large city here in Nashville, versus my experience growing up. Even before I was 18, I think I only went to, Minneapolis, St. Paul area maybe 5 or 6 times.
Yeah.
And, so my life was very small. And of course, my kids' experience as teenagers, thus far is they've been exposed to a whole lot more than I was growing up, for sure.
So what kind of a kid were you growing up? What kind of family did you grow up in?
So my dad actually owned his own metal fab shop.
Okay.
And so he was a welder and fabricator most of my life. He worked for a farm dealership for a long time, when I was really young, but then he started his own business when I was probably 11 or 12. Mm-hmm. And then my mom just retired a couple years ago. She was actually a music teacher, but privately, pretty much the whole time. So she taught piano, voice, and beginner violin and guitar and things like that, but mainly piano and voice. So, yeah.
Siblings?
Yeah, I'm the youngest of 3. Oddly enough, both of my siblings live here.
Really?
So, yeah, we were, my sister and I, so I was, I guess, 3 grades behind my sister and 4 behind my brother. And my sister and I started doing some music together. And when I was later on in high school, and doing concerts and, singing in churches and things like that. And then we moved here together. So she and her husband and I moved here in 1994 just to get closer to the music scene. We just absolutely loved singing and, creating and things like that. So it was just a really kind of a neat season after high school. I went to a year at a college in Minnesota and then transferred to Belmont. And but it's here we are 28 years later, and it's home. So, yeah.
So Belmont, what'd you study?
So my first semester, I was a vocal performance major, and then I realized that if I needed something to fall back on, if that didn't work, I decided to go into business. So I just changed. And the truth of the matter is I studied voice, even after Belmont, privately for a while, but then just really, I don't know, it's one of those things I think I realized back then, either you can, do music or you can't. And the education piece for me at the time didn't seem like it was going to really benefit me as far as my musicality goes. And I knew that to be more of a success, if you will, I needed to know the nuts and bolts of the music business, as it were, and so I changed to a business major after that.
What was it that drew you into business?
It's funny. I was telling a buddy of mine this the other day. So I started my first company when I was 15, and I'd always had an entrepreneurial mind and desires to I think in some ways to kind of follow in my parents' footsteps. They were both self-employed, and at the same time, I just loved the idea of, well, really, sky's the limit. When you're self-employed, you get to dictate your success. As opposed to, in most cases, if you're working for someone else, you're kind of capped out. And so I think early on, I'd sit in my bedroom and start running numbers and think, man, if I could actually sell this many, services at the time, man, that actually is, it's more possible to get rich that way. So that's kind of, at 15 years old, I was already thinking on those terms.
What kind of dreams did you have in college or even high school about that? Any idea what you wanted to what you were thinking about?
Yes and no. So it was funny because right after school, I thought, man, of course at the time, and this is 1996, there was a lot of people, doing very well selling records, right? So at the time I'm thinking, man, I can give people goosebumps. And to be honest, it was one of those things where, hey, I'm on my own here and I need to make a living, and I want to make a good living. And so I think my dreams were a bit more business oriented, if you will, as opposed to where most people that I was hanging out with at the time that were musicians were creatives. Mm-hmm. And they were way more into their craft and passionate about music and so on.
Really?
And I don't know if I would even, would have been able to even vocalize that at the time, no pun intended, but I was way more interested in the business end of things. And so, yeah, I love music and I love what music does, but at the same time, I like the opportunities that business can create, not only for myself, right, but for other people too. So, yeah.
So what did you do after school?
So it was interesting. Shortly after that, I met my wife, who, we've been married 23 years, and at that time, my priorities kind of shifted, meaning that a lot of people that I was hanging out with said yes to everything, and thus, kind of lived, I literally had friends that were almost homeless. They were doing what they loved. They were, playing music all the time, but they weren't making any money doing it.
Yeah.
And I grew up, I'm not going to say poor, but at the same time, we didn't have much. And I just didn't want to, be wondering where the next paycheck was coming from. So I actually ended up getting into facilities management with a large retail chain and ended up doing that for about 17 years. But what was great about it is it had a lot of flexibility. So really? I could pretty much sing, whenever I want. I would take off in the afternoons and go do a session, leave early on Fridays and go somewhere and, do a concert and things like that. So I liked the assurance that, I was able to provide for, my family, at the time, and have some certainty. And at the same time was really grateful I got to be creative and have those experiences too.
17 years, where'd you go after that?
So during that time, I actually, long story short, my brother-in-law called me one day and he said, hey, Osk, where do I get a thermostat cover with a combination? Where do I get a thermostat cover with a combination lock? And he was working in South Florida for banks that had foreclosed properties. And so what was funny is technically that was his idea. So he called me and he said, all of the agents keep losing the keys for these thermostats. So when the bank would get the property up for sale, agents would go in and show it, right? Well, they would, of course, want the house, this is in South Florida, so they'd want the house when they're showing it to be just perfectly cooled, and they'd drop the temperature to 60 degrees, something like that. So the banks started throwing stat guards on everything, and then they would lose the keys. So he and I at the time went into business together and, created a company around this product, which is a thermostat guard with a combination lock. So anyway, I ended up buying him out a few years after that. He moved from Florida to Nashville and got really busy doing construction. So I kind of took the ball and ran with it at that point. So, well, you asked, what I did, of course, right after when I left, facilities management, it was because of that product that I was able to kind of transition to being self-employed. And at the time, kind of scary, but at the same time, super exciting. And so this was...
what year was that?
So this was only 4 years ago.
Really?
Yeah. So the first, the last few years that I was, with this company, again, the flexibility was so nice because I could still do music when I wanted, but then at the same time, man, I had a product that I knew would sell because it was just a better mousetrap. So it was a long process of kind of understanding how to scale that, but it was nice to be able to jump ship and be self-employed at that point.
What has been your greatest stumbling block thus far, besides COVID? We had talked before, and you had said COVID was really giving you trouble, maybe it still is. But what's been your biggest stumbling block in getting this idea out there, this product out there?
By far, me.
Really?
And
What do you mean by that?
You've probably heard the term imposter syndrome, where you're standing in a quote-unquote group of people and you just don't feel like you measure up. You don't feel like you have what it takes. And so part of this was, I've always been one to, think at least on the lines of go big or go home. But at the same time, I lacked a lot of courage to sell, to make the phone calls, to the major retail chains and get this product out there. And I think part of it was I didn't know in a lot of ways what I didn't know. And therefore that kind of hindered me. But at the same time, it was just a real confidence issue at the time. And so it took several years longer, really, than it might have needed to. I think the number one problem with most of us in general is the man in the mirror. It's setting fear aside and taking that next step. So,
what are you doing to rectify that?
Yeah, so it's funny, when I was still working at Verizon when I, launched this product, right? Well, at the time, I joined a men's entrepreneurial group. You probably heard the term Mastermind, and that term was made famous, if you will, by
Napoleon Hill.
Napoleon Hill, right? And so I joined a group called ISI, Iron Sharpens Iron, and this is about a year before I left Verizon, and so the group's kind of main thrust is mutually assured success, right? So you have a board of directors for your business and kind of a band of brothers really for your personal life too. So we not only tackle the business, the day-to-day operations and, getting things in place that help you to, scale on a practical level, but then also we help each other deal with the man in the mirror. It's so really based on the advice from the guys in my group, I decided to take the leap. And so this was at the end of 17. So in 2018, I was officially self-employed, and I'm so grateful, that I took that plunge. I mean, the first year doubled my income, and just was able to get after it. And part of it was because I had, systems and processes in place, to understand what those next steps are, again, on a practical level. But then I had the support system, behind me. One of the things that kind of hit me early on, when you think about it on a practical level, right, is Jesus and the 12 disciples. Some people think, well, Jesus needed a group of people to help him. Well, of course he didn't, right? I mean, he's God. He knew they needed each other. And so what's fascinating is very, very quickly, I realized that I wasn't alone. So the life of a solopreneur can be pretty scary, pretty isolating.
Yeah.
And so to have a band of brothers around me to fill in the gaps and to ask powerful questions and to pop bubbles and encourage me and all that kind of stuff was really the difference maker in my success. Yeah.
You mentioned support system. Like, what sort of support system did you have around you?
So, with regards to ISI, we meet every single week. And
ISI is your mastermind?
Yeah, yep. So that has been by far the biggest, catalyst and blessing in my life to move the needle. And at the same time, honestly, I would be remiss if I didn't say my wife. Lisa she does, the books for our business. She helps us, helps me with all the, shipping and receiving and things like that. So whereas I'm more of an idea, big picture thinker, she is very organized and likes spreadsheets and keeping me on task and that kind of thing. So, yeah.
Describe for the listeners that don't know what a mastermind is.
Yeah. So, in a nutshell, I guess I like to paint the picture this way. So, if you are on your own, there's a lot of gaps. Like I said earlier, you don't know what you don't know. And that alone is what actually tipped me, kind of over the scale, if you will, to jump in head first with these guys. Mm-hmm. And because I was afraid, the things that I didn't know would cause me to fail, mm-hmm. let alone understanding, I've got a group of men who are coming alongside me that have chosen to care not only for me as an individual, but for my family and for my business. And the intentionality around, guys that are just really forward-thinking and into personal growth and professional growth is, it's really fascinating. The saying that you become like the people you spend the most time with, mm-hmm. I think any parent would realize that's the truth, right? Because we are so careful at who we would encourage our kids to hang out with. Well, the same is true for us. So when you're hanging around people who are winning in areas that you might not be, mm-hmm. it's fascinating to see how you end up complementing each other. And then, of course, guys who are willing to pay for a pretty hefty monthly fee, if you will, to be a part of a group like that. They're literally putting their money where their mouth is because they want to grow. They want to move the needle and be, successful. Mm-hmm. And of course, in the world's eyes, right, we often just think of that as money. But if you're in ISI, what I love about it is we talk about everything from, your physical health to your spiritual health to your marriage, and then of course, your P&L. And it's so success, if it's not holistic, if your family's falling apart but you're making a lot of money, are you a success? Well, no. And the converse is true then. If you can't provide for your family and yet you feel like you have a great marriage and so on, that's a pretty tough place to be, especially as a man who, believes that, hey, I'm the leader of the Osk clan, and it's my job to set the tone and provide for my people and to raise them in a way that's meaningful and so on. So yeah, the mastermind concept, it sounds a little bit woo-hoo in some ways. To a lot of people it's a foreign concept, but it's I think people in various cultures have been kind of masterminding for centuries, right? If you think about like even the Jewish population, they have a reputation of winning. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of it is because they help each other. They stick together and they want one another to win. So anyway, that's kind of the picture of it.
How'd you find yours?
It was funny. One day I was looking at Facebook and someone shared a video of a guy named Aaron Walker who was walking on the Greenway, and he was just talking. And he just seemed like such a nice guy, but he was talking about important things. So over the course of a few weeks, I followed him and started listening to some of his Greenway videos. He'd be out walking in the morning, and he'd just turn on the camera and start talking about important things. Mm-hmm. And I was really taken aback by not only his, I don't know, his humble presence, but at the same time, he seemed to have a lot of insights that, that were inspiring to me. And talking about things that, back to that, I don't know what I don't know. It was like literally new information that I started absorbing. And I was so taken aback by, honestly, just his humble presence. I sent him a message and I said, hey, I see you live in Hendersonville. Can I buy you lunch sometime, next week? Well, the phone rang like 10 minutes later, and we ended up talking for a half an hour. We ended up getting together, and it was just kind of the start of a real, very, very new shift in my life. So Aaron was, most people know who Dave Ramsey is, the financial guru. And Aaron was actually in Dave's mastermind, the Eagle Group, for I think 20 years. And so then he started ISI, and we now have 150 men from 8 different countries in that group. And I'm actually facilitating 2 of those groups. And I love it. I feel like I found my people.
Really?
Yeah. They're just awesome guys. Yeah. So
if someone's interested, if what you were talking about in that group, how do you recommend they find a group?
So here's what's fascinating is there's mastermind groups all over the country, and they're popping up like crazy because people, especially solopreneurs, guys running small businesses and so on, realize that when you're isolated, it just breeds non-success. So I would say, if look online in your area and see, who in your area might lead a group like that. Here's a fascinating paradigm, though. So one thing that I think is neat with ISI is that, these guys, most of them don't live near me. I've got a couple of guys in my group, that are out in California and Oregon, Florida. And here's something that's kind of telling. So we talk about really deep stuff. Some stuff that's really, incredibly personal. And to have men that you do life with on a very deep level who are not in your community actually is it feels safer. If you're not going to, when you share some things in your life that are, that could be just real sensitive, you probably aren't going to run into this person at church or at the grocery store or, even their wife or something like that. So there's a little bit of psychological safety in the fact that these guys don't live close to me. So I like the idea of a mastermind that is, where the men are spread out a bit. Yeah.
So how's business with the combination lock for thermostats, commercial spaces, and such?
I tell you what, I'm so grateful. Truth be told, in 18, things started going really well. 19, I'm like, holy smokes. I'm pun intended. I'm like, this is just better than I thought it could be. Well, then of course COVID hit, and the world shut down. So my product is mainly a commercial product, right? You'll find it in offices and restaurants and things like that, where you don't want people tampering with thermostats, and there's typically a lot of people. Some people buy them for their homes and things like that, but very few.
So the kids don't touch it, or
right.
or the husband doesn't touch it for the wife.
Exactly. Yeah, my mom and dad fought like crazy over the temperature. Mom was always cold, and dad was sweating, laying in bed. But it was interesting when COVID hit. Of course, the world shut down. So 2 things happened there. Of course, people stopped, purchasing my product on a major level. We went from selling several thousand units a month. And I think in that first week when life really started getting slow, we dropped down to a couple of hundred. And at that point, honestly, I was thinking, man, my business might be done. And then some other challenges came up with regards to even getting inventory, because the ports, supply chain was just hammered, and it still is. We're, even was it last week, Shanghai shut down their port. And of course, you've heard the horror stories in, Port of Los Angeles, where there's ships sitting out in the ocean for 9 months because they just can't get into port to unload. So that's been a very, very real problem. And I'm really grateful. We've been in Home Depot for, I guess, 5 years, which to me, honestly, was just this wonderful, pipe dream. And then, so right before COVID, I actually started courting Lowe's. And they said yes, and then of course COVID hit, and they went dark. So last fall, I got a message that they wanted to start the conversation back up. And they said yes, and we ended up landing in 1,700 Lowe's stores last month. So I'm really, really grateful for the opportunity. And when I say my business is small, we're running this out of my house, right?
Yeah.
It's very small.
Yeah.
And we have a partner in California that handles our distribution and so on. But with regards to sales and even some smaller drop shipping and so on, that's stuff that we're just bootstrapping it still. So I'm super grateful for the opportunity. But it's been a heck of a roller coaster ride too.
What's the dream for the business?
So it's fascinating because for the last couple of years, I've wanted to launch. So I trademarked the name StatGuard Plus, and so I'm launching what we're probably going to call the StatGuard Pro or the Lockbox Pro. So the vision here in the next probably 3 or 4 months is to launch a pro unit, if you will, to the pro channel, meaning HVAC supply houses, electrical supply houses, restaurant supply houses, and things like that. And the reason that we want a unique product for that channel is because they're demanding it, meaning they do not want to compete, of course, with big box or retail. They want a unique product, and I don't blame them, right? It's they have a channel that they, some of these businesses, of course, have served for decades and decades. But they do that well because they have unique products. And so we're really trying to help them and, of course, help ourselves stay in that lane. So I'm pretty excited about the rest of this year because when the StatGuard Pro is launched, it's going to be really fun just to get it out there to those distributors and so on. So
what's the difference between the Pro and the Plus?
Yeah, so the one that we just launched in Lowe's, of course, is a combination lock. What's neat about that one is in order to change the combination code, all you got to do is switch a little tab on the back. So you open it, switch the tab, change your code, from A to B, and switch it back to A, and you're rocking and rolling. So the Pro unit is actually going to have that capability, plus have a key option. So if you picture in a facilities management situation, you've got, just say you've got a retail store with a manager and, 3 assistant managers. You'll be able to share the code with whoever you want, to open that and have access to it. But if someone or a group of people end up leaving the company, right, or get fired, and no one knows what that code is,
they can reset it.
They can reset it. Open it with the key, reset the code, and then, of course, give that information to whoever they want to have access to that. It's fascinating. Even in a 2,000 square foot retail, setting, what we're finding is a 1 or 2 degree difference in a store, can, especially if you think about the temperature swings in winter to summer, it can cause a massive shift in a budget. So if you jump your stat from 72 to 74 in the winter in Minnesota, get ready to see your energy bill rise. That 2 degrees makes a difference. Let alone, of course, if you're like my mom and she wants it 78 degrees all the time, and so on. But so a lot of it is just in general, people just jacking around with the thermostat, right? But it's also a budget decision to make sure that no one else is spending your dollars, that type of thing. So.
What's the goals for your life?
Goals for my life, man.
Where do you want to go? I mean, you got this. Knowing you as much as I do, there's got to be something more beyond that you're like, that's.
What's really fascinating is in the last couple of years after joining ISI, and about 2 years ago, I went through. So there's a psychologist who's in ISI named Dr. Andy Garrett. He lives out in California. Oddly enough, his grandfather is the one who started the Carl's Jr. burger chain, Carl Karcher. And so Dr. Garrett is a clinical psychologist, but he actually put together a program called the True North Blueprint, and it helps people build self-awareness. So in essence, it helps you ask the question, who are you and what is your purpose? Which seems, again, on face value, oh, for heaven's sakes, a lot of people hear that and they kind of roll their eyes. Over the last 2 years, I've been doing a lot of deep work in that area and realizing, for instance, the word authenticity. often gets overused and misused, really. So that word, of course, comes from the word author. And, so what's been authored in me? What's been authored in you? What makes us unique? Why am I different from you? We like to think, especially in America, that we get to choose everything, right? We're land of the free, home of the brave. What's fascinating with authenticity, and I didn't realize this until recently, is that, not only did I not choose my eye color, I didn't choose my taste buds. And in fact, I didn't even choose my personality. Those of us who have kids, right? They come out of the gate incredibly different, very hardwired. And so, which I think is honestly just to the glory of God. He made us, He authored us, and made us very unique. And so when you understand, what's been authored in me, for instance, core values, right? I think according to psychologists, there's, I think, a potential of around 80. So on a very basic level, what does my core value, if you and I were to sit and choose the top 5 core values, yours would be different than mine. That is your decision-making, matrix for life, and mine are different. There's a hierarchy of those things that that are established in us, and of course, authenticity is tied to the word identity, right? Well, what do you identify with? And what's fascinating, growing up, I'll be honest, my framework, and I'm guessing a lot of guys listening to this can identify with this, is I was desperate. And I didn't realize it at the time, but I was desperate to become somebody, or at the very least, not be a nobody. Well, to me at the time, that meant I needed accomplishments. I needed to swing for the fence, hit some things out of the park, so that people would look at me and say that I'm a somebody, that kind of thing. And so the fascinating thing is the identity piece, as I've been shifting gears here recently, is now that I know, who I am, the vocabulary to describe the most powerful, precious, courageous things in me, the things that give my goosebumps, right? That kind of stuff. What makes me different from you? I'm no longer looking for other people's approval. I'm very, very intrinsically motivated, and I know what impact I want to have in every single room that I'm in. There's no question mark inside of me or over my head. So after going through the blueprint, you asked me, what's the vision for the rest of my life? I'll be honest with you. I feel like I'm a passionate creative, kind of on a very basic level. But at the same time, I love the fact that I've built a business that's kind of self-sustaining and, kind of pays the bills, as it were, right? But Dr. Andy and I are actually launching on a very large scale now this authentic blueprint, the True North blueprint, to help people identify those things inside of them that are most powerful, precious, and courageous, right? What is it that motivates you? What impact do you want to have in this world? And, I forget who said it, but, the dent in the universe, right? I want to see the David Osk-shaped dent in the universe. So some of the things that I've identified in myself are, I love encouraging people. I love helping people identify those things in them that are beautiful, that are powerful. And I told somebody the other day, I said, I think I might be the best encourager the world has ever seen. And what I mean by that is it's not fluff, right? I'm not a cheerleader. If someone shares with me and identifies something about themselves that I think is true, I love to validate that and just honor that and help them to become, the most fulfilled and finest version of themselves, but do it in a way that's very intrinsically motivating, as opposed to, wanting someone else's approval. And that's a big shift, and I didn't realize how big of a shift it was until I started doing some of that work. So anyway, I think that, my highest good, my summum bonum would be helping people identify those things that are most precious to them, so that, they have certainty in their life. An example of this would be, like, I'm a dad, Parker is 17, Kate is 15. And my goal now as a father is to remove as much uncertainty in our home as I possibly can, right? To be solid, not only in myself, but then to identify those things that are a clear yes in my family, a clear no in my family, right? We're not just getting up in the morning, licking our fingers and hoping, the wind blows us in a better direction. We know exactly where we're going. We know exactly the things that we value, the impact that we want to have as a family, things that we say, to one another, and then also, of course, when people enter our home, what is that? What is it? Just we're here to grill burgers and talk about silly things. Well, sometimes that's fine, but at the same time, I really want people to feel inspired when they leave my presence. I love the word, inspiration. It means to breathe life into. And the fascinating thing is now that I think I've been operating, in that way my whole life. But neat thing is now that I've actually put a vocabulary to it and identified, exactly kind of, what's authored in me, the way that I roll naturally, I'm able then to even have, an impact with people that I meet selling thermostat guards. For instance, I got a call from a guy, I guess it was in January, and oddly enough, he bought a stat guard for his home. And he called me and he said, hey, I'm having a hard time here with this thing. He said, my son keeps figuring out what the code, the combo is. And I'm like, really? I said, tell me more about that. And he said, I've changed it 5 times and he somehow figures it out. And I think he's been choosing numbers that, his son can guess so he won't forget, right? Last 3 digits of your cell phone number, or your social security, or your birthday, things like that. So the longer that I spoke to him, I said, my stat guard, I said, is like a fence in your backyard. It makes a better neighbor, that kind of thing. And I said, can I challenge you on something? I said, I don't think you have a thermostat guard problem. I said, I think you have a son problem. And you need to have a conversation with him, that's maybe a bit tough. And it got really quiet. And I could tell that I kind of, struck a nerve in some way. And his voice got very weak. And he said, yeah, that's a tough one. And I said, his name was Charles. And I said, Charles, tell me more about that. And he said, my son struggles with depression. He's 32 years old and he's still living in our basement. And he's attempted suicide twice. And I'm afraid that, if I push him on this, that, and he never even finished that sentence. I could tell that he was, on the verge of tears. And so what was fascinating in that moment, I got to have the David Osk impact, right, that I wanted to have. I don't know this guy. I don't know the entire situation. But I could tell right then, right, that this man loved his boy. And at 32 years old, he probably was a bit of a boy, not a man yet, right? He had a lot going on there. And by the end of that conversation, we ended up praying together. And I think I was able to encourage him that, his power bill probably wasn't that important. Loving his son was. And entering into a deeper space with his boy, getting messy with him, right? Sharing his own struggles with his son. We talked, it went deep. And I'll be honest, I think that when I started this company, I probably would have wanted to help that man, right? I would have wanted to love him, and I probably would have in some way, but because, I have a more courage and more quote-unquote permission to be me, I was able to enter into a much better conversation with him, and to validate some things in him that are just great. He's a great dad, and he loves his son, and his son is having a really hard time. And since then, we've talked 3 times. Isn't that fascinating?
All through buying a thermostat cover from you.
Yeah. Anyway, I've had several moments like that in the last few years running a thermostat guard business. But again, that's a context, right? I don't care if I'm selling, toilet seats, right? I happen to have a product that is just a better mousetrap, and I'm grateful beyond measure that it has value in the marketplace. But again, back to your question, what does the rest of my life look like? Yeah, man, I want to have conversations like that. I want to help men and women, for that matter, identify those things inside of them, those things that have been authored in them by their maker, so that they can lay hold of those things and almost, get have more permission just to be themselves. And it's not necessarily people who are just going through a hard time, right? It's people that have so much gifting and so much passion and so much ability, but yet they lack that self-awareness to be able to rise up, swing for the fence, throw their head back and run. And that was my story. So, yeah, I want to do more of that.
David Osk, let's get to rapid fire questions.
All right.
Hey everyone, we all know that the Holy Smokes community is 5,000 plus and growing, and we have more than a handful of Holy Smokers within the community that have podcasts. And so today I wanted to feature one of our members, Kevin East, in Tyler, Texas.
Over the past few decades, much has been said and written about leadership, but I don't think enough has been said or written about followership. I believe great leaders are also great followers. So whether you're leading an organization or just leading within the context of your home, following Jesus impacts every aspect of your life. I'm Kevin East, the CEO of Mentoring Alliance, as well as a dad of 5, and I invite you to check out my podcast, Following to Lead, where you'll hear from business leaders, pastors, authors, speakers, and parents about how following Jesus shapes and guides our lives and how it can impact yours. Check out Following to Lead in your favorite podcast app.
So be sure to check out Following to Lead with Kevin East. And if you have a podcast and you want it to be featured here on the Holy Smokes podcast, be sure to reach out to me and we'll consider airing it. Thanks.
Rapid fire. Fire. Here.
I don't think I started the podcast asking the question, what you smoking? What were you smoking?
Man, I've got a Perdomo here. I'm a big sucker for the Perdomos. I end up, if I find a stick that I like, I keep going back to it. It's kind of like I'm same thing at a restaurant. If I find something I like, I keep going back to it. Yeah, I love Perdomos.
Where did you first try cigars or pipe?
So, you know what? This was actually kind of a fun story. So I was actually in a quartet in high school. We thought we were really cool. Our group name was Half Eternity, which is, of course, an oxymoron. And so the guys in that group were, and they still are, dear friends, but we would get someone else, of course, because we were like 15 years old, to go buy the Swisher Sweets at the gas station. And then we'd go sit out, in some field or at the golf course at night and smoke Swisher Sweets. And, but I probably didn't really pick up, true cigar smoking until maybe 10 years ago. So I'm 48 now, so probably in my late 30s, when I really started to understand, what a good cigar was.
Have you ever done pipe?
Yeah. In fact, I remember my dad smoking a pipe growing up, so once in a while I'd take a few tokes off of his, right? But about a year ago, my buddy Zach bought a pipe for me, and I've probably smoked it maybe 10 times. And of course, the scent of pipe tobacco is just ridiculous. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, I think I probably enjoy a cigar more, probably just because it's maybe just a little bit easier, not as much work, that kind of thing.
That's pretty much universally the
right.
the consensus.
Yeah.
With people that ask that question. Favorite cigar? Perdomos?
You
have one that's even...
It's at the top of the list. I'll be honest. CAO used to be made here in Nashville.
Really?
And they got bought out probably,
Really?
I'm guessing 10 years ago. But
yeah.
I really, really love CAOs. I've never had a bad one. Perdomos are great. I used to go to church with a neurologist, and his vendors, he had his own practice. His vendors would bring in sticks that they, smuggled in from Cuba and things like that. So I think the best one I've ever had was the Monte Cristo A from Cuba. So, yeah.
Best dollar for dollar cigar.
Man, you know what's interesting is I've been buying really for about 10 years the JR brand, and they've got their house brand, and I think one's called the limited edition. And if you buy a pack of those, they end up being like $4 a piece or something like that. But I think, yeah, dollar for dollar, the limited edition JRs, I love. They're great.
What's your splurge cigar? You're celebrating.
Yeah, man. I've had a couple of Davidoffs, and they're, $25 or something.
Yeah.
But I'll be honest, I mean, they're great sticks, but my favorite one is this, actually, I think it's the one you're smoking right now. Yeah, the 20th anniversary Perdomo. I love it.
I don't even remember where I got this. I think someone probably gifted it to me.
Yeah.
I pulled it out of the humidor getting ready to head here, and I was like, I think it's time I smoke this one.
That's a good one.
Where's your go-to place to get your smokes?
So there's a place in Hendersonville called the Smoky Cigar on Indian Lake Boulevard, and man, I go in there 3 or 4 times a month. I got a lot of friends here in Franklin, so we'll go to Franklin Cigar or here at Crown too. So.
Favorite liquid pairing with your smoke?
Oh man. So it's actually a new one. I had my brother bought me a bottle of the Jack Daniel's 27 about a year ago, and that was my favorite. But now he bought me, my birthday was a few weeks ago, and he bought me the Angel's Envy Rye, and that is fantastic. Although, hold on, there's a buddy came over the other night, and he had one called Smoke Wagon that I'd never had. It's a small batch bourbon, and oh man, that was fantastic. Yeah.
Most interesting person you've ever met through cigars?
Wow. So I suppose it's been a month or so ago. We were down at Jamie Slingerland's house here in Franklin, and Kay was there. And I met a guy there who was Aaron Spradlin. He's in Holy Smokes. He was leaving the next day to go to the Ukraine to smuggle children out of the Ukraine. And honestly, I need to find him again, because we actually prayed for him that day. And to me, that guy's fascinating.
Best place you've ever smoked?
Okay, so I'm a golfer, so I went to St. Andrews to see the Open about 5 years ago, and right off of 18, the beach there is where they filmed, the movie Chariots of Fire when he's running on the beach. And I sat out there and had a stick looking at the North Sea, and that was awesome.
I would assume that's probably your most memorable cigar experience.
Yeah.
Marvel or DC?
Oh man, I love Superman, but I would say DC. I'm sorry, Marvel. Yeah, when what's the movie that has the little raccoon in it that came out with
Guardians of the Galaxy?
Guardians of the Galaxy, for heaven's sakes.
Rocket.
Those guys, I mean, you mix like total rock star ability with a bunch of humor, and I'm in. Yeah.
Favorite superhero? As a kid and then now?
It's probably Superman. Yeah, I love the idea of flying and shooting laser beams out of my eyes and melting things. That's pretty bad, eh?
Star Wars or Star Trek?
Oh, gosh. So, probably Star Wars, although I love the latest Star Treks with Chris Pine in them. They're really, really well done. But, Star Wars is probably just slightly ahead.
Favorite food?
Mexican. I like a good hot salsa.
Got some sports teams you're into?
I grew up, of course, in Minnesota, being a Vikings fan, and then got into the Chicago Bulls when I was in college. And at the same time, I've not really followed a whole lot of sports except for golf. If I can watch a golf, round on TV or, go live to a tournament, I'm there.
Who's your favorite golfer right now?
Oh gosh, this is probably a little tacky, but I like Justin Thomas, and the reason is because of his mouth. he says the craziest stinking stuff on camera. And, he's swearing at the ball. And I saw a guy's hat the other day that says, "I golf, therefore I swear." And of course, you get onto the golf course and it's maddening.
Yeah.
But that guy he's an amazing golfer, but then he just seems like a real dude.
How'd you get into golf?
My brother, actually. So he was 4 years older than me and on the golf team and still just a phenomenal golfer. But, I wanted to be like my older brother. So, yeah.
Dogs, cats, neither, or both?
We've got 3 dogs and 1 cat. And, but my favorite, we've got a Silky and a Yorkie in the house. And they've got so much personality and they're a lot of fun.
Nickname growing up or in college?
Pete. So it's literally in the yearbook. My sister's friend thought that my name was Pete Osk, and my dad is David Sr., and It was kind of an easy one. A friend of my mom had a nickname for me growing up that was something in German, and our nanny actually picked up on that. Well, then my siblings started calling me Pete, and then all of my friends picked up on it, and it just stuck. So, yeah.
What's one unusual fact that few people know about you?
An unusual fact. So, you know what? Being a creative, again, I love creating things. Probably, I had my first and only, actually, children's book published about 3 years ago.
Really?
About 2 British mice named Fire and Ice. So, yeah.
Are you a reader?
Yeah, I'm more audible. Honestly, I'm always listening to like audiobooks when I'm driving or even at the gym. Most people are cranking some crazy tunes, and I'm listening to, some audible books.
What the types of books do you listen to?
Well, recently, especially being an ISI, they're books on, vision and setting goals and, creating better habits in your life and things like that. So I love personal growth.
What are some of the latest ones that have really made an impact on you, or even all-time? All-time best ones.
Okay, so the first one that came to mind was there's a guy here in town named Chris Kelso, and he wrote the book Overcoming the Imposter. So someone gave me that book. I read it. I couldn't put it down. And I sent him a message on his website, and I said, if you're ever in Nashville, give me a call. I didn't know where he lived. Well, he responded back right away, I live in Nashville. Go figure, so many authors here. Anyway, we ended up having lunch and hanging out a little bit, but just a fantastic read.
That's cool. If you could be any animal, what would you be?
Oh, man. Probably like a white Siberian tiger or something like that.
Ooh.
Yeah.
What's the best type of cheese?
Cheese. Smoked Gouda.
Ooh.
All day.
It's the second Gouda I've gotten today in these interviews. Are you an early riser, a night owl, or normal?
No, it's like a joke in our family. I'm up by 4:30 or 5 every morning, and I go to bed about 8:30. It's another reason why, even early on in moving to Nashville for music, everybody wanted to get started, doing writing sessions at 10 p.m. And I'm like, man, that's an hour past my bedtime. So, yeah, that's kind of funny.
If you could live anywhere, where would you live?
Oh man, I'll be honest. I really love London. I've only been there one time, just a few years back, and I loved everything about it. Yeah.
What culture other than your own do you find most fascinating?
Oh, that's a great question. What's interesting is I studied a lot of Italian music when I was taking voice lessons in college and so on, and we're actually going to Italy here in about 3 weeks, and so we've done of course over the years I've had a lot of influences in Italian and things like that, but I'm really, I guess right now, most excited about experiencing that culture firsthand. I've been wanting to go for years, and my daughter plays the violin, and her school is doing a tour there, so we're going to Italy, and I actually get to sing with that group too, so I'm super excited about that.
It's a beautiful country. I absolutely love it. I want to go back so bad. What's your greatest strength and what's your greatest weakness?
So strength, I would say, would be inspiring or encouraging, to breathe life into somebody, but to do it in a way that's really authentic and meaningful. Weakness, probably the shiny object syndrome. I can get sidetracked in something that seems exciting and take my eye off the ball in a real hurry, so I got to be mindful of that.
Who's been the greatest influence in your life?
Wow. I would say outside of my wife, probably my sister. She, I'll get choked up even thinking about it, but even since I was very young, I love the word for, F-O-R. In fact, I think it's the best gift you can give anybody by being for them, right? When you know someone is for you, no matter what, that is powerful. And Kirsten has been for me every single day of my life, and in such tangible ways. She's one of the finest people I've ever met, and I get to call her my sister.
Who's the first person you think of when you hear the word successful?
So besides Kirsten, honestly, I would say my buddy David Ash. So he and I joined ISI the same day. So, my last name is ASK, Osk, and we happened to join ISI the same day. They got our paperwork kind of messed up, and they thought it was a typo and all that kind of stuff. But this is a guy who lives, he's an attorney, lives in Jackson, Mississippi, has 5 beautiful children, beautiful wife, an attorney who lives in a camper. It's a really nice one, but they do life on the road. And he is a bright light wherever he goes, successful in his family, in really in every single way, and just a wonderful human being.
What do you do for self-care, to rest, to recharge? Yeah,
that's something I've been learning more about, honestly, just in the last couple of years here. So even lately, this last year I've been going to the Y and just lifting, getting back into pushing some weight. And then I love journaling. I like just to listen and write what I feel maybe God is telling me or what needs to come out.
If you were arrested with no explanation, what would your friends and family think you've done?
Oh gosh. Probably speeding.
What does Holy Smokes mean to you, and how has it contributed to your spiritual journey?
Wow. What was interesting is so when I was invited to this group by my buddy John Bogus, he lives in Orlando, on the outset I thought it was just going to be, just kind of a fun social media, type group. Mm-hmm. And what I have found are some of the most, capable and deep and forward-thinking guys, I'm just really surprised at the caliber of people that Holy Smokes has drawn. And spiritually, probably not a ton. I feel pretty dialed in, in that way. But again, the influence to have met some of these guys that are, really kicking butt in life, and at the same time know that they know their need, right? They know their need, and they know who is the provider, the ultimate provider, and that it's just is a great reminder to, just to just stand at the foot of the cross next to them, and look up.
If you could have a holy smoke with any 3 people throughout history, living or deceased, who would they be? Can't name Jesus.
Okay. Abraham Lincoln.
Ooh.
We homeschool our kids kind of part-time, a hybrid version, but this last year we did a whole study on Lincoln, and what a fascinating man. So Lincoln, probably Elon Musk, honestly, just recently with all this, stuff he's been up to. Fascinating personality. And honestly, my brother-in-law, Victor, so Kirsten's husband, he actually passed away from leukemia about 4 years ago. And he would never smoke a cigar with me, but I'd like to sit with him and smoke a cigar and talk about good stuff. I miss him deeply.
All right, if we're to meet 1 year from today, And I have a bottle of that bourbon that you showed me a picture of. What was that stuff called?
What was it here? Smoke Wagon? Smoke Wagon.
Smoke Wagon. What are we celebrating?
Man. Wow, what a great question. The first thing I thought of, honestly, was like, a business success. And knowing what I know about your story, by the way, I would hope that you and I are celebrating deeper peace. And at the same time, knowing that, we both follow the author and the finisher, right? And things happen in our lives for a reason. I would hope that we would be celebrating deeper awareness of why God has allowed hard things to happen in our lives and to see the fruit of that.
And I've never used it before.
Thank you. Yeah. David Osk, thanks for being on the Holy Smokes podcast.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Hey everyone, I wanted to announce that we have Holy Smokes gear. That's right, we have swag. We currently have hats, shirts, stickers like for your vehicle or your travel humidor, magnets, even branded bourbon glasses for a limited time. Go to holysmokes.club and click on the shop tab. That's holysmokes.club. I'm super proud of the shirts. They're made with Bella canvas shirts that are soft and incredibly comfortable. The hats fit wonderfully, which can be a problem for those of us with big noggins. We plan on having a lot more to offer, like Guayabera shirts, additional t-shirt designs, beanies, polos, hoodies, cigar accessories, and much more. Check it out. And even if you don't make a purchase now, be sure to sign up for that email list, as I've thrown a couple big discount coupon codes for those exclusively on that list. So click the shop tab at holysmokes.club. Thanks.